We are in chapter 3. So welcome everyone. And I want to thank David. Thank you, David, for sponsoring tonight's class. And it's a good opportunity to make a pitch. If any of you would like to sponsor an upcoming class, especially if you have a good reason to, a simcha or a yard site, or if you're just in the mood of doing a good mitzvah and sponsoring one of the weekly Tanya classes, let me know. And we'll make a good partnership. Okay, right now we've got this class going for a few more weeks. May 18th, we're going to take another one of our pauses for our next course. Our next course starts May 18th, 6-week course, titled Beyond Right. Beautiful, beautiful course, very rich course. That is going to be a deep dive into the world of Jewish law, Jewish Talmudic thinking, and Jewish values. It's gonna be a very interesting blend of concepts and themes. All right, we'll talk more about that soon. We're in the middle of chapter 3, and it's been a little bit of time, so let's recap a little bit. Chapter 3, the Alter Rebbe starts introducing to us the anatomy of the divine soul. So we all have a piece of God within us. We all have two souls. We have an animal soul, which is a natural soul. And then we have a godly soul, which is a holy soul. The Alter Rebbe and Tanya first introduces us to the anatomy of the godly soul, and chapter 6 will be introduced to the anatomy of the animal soul, one soul at a time. Right now we are learning about our godly souls. And if you want to understand the operating system of our divine souls, on page 42, we've already spoken about this in the last class. Let's just review it again. Page 42. There are 10 soul powers. Every soul has 10 soul powers. The potentials of the human being, of the godly soul. And generally speaking, there are two categories. There's the intellectual capabilities of the soul, and there's the emotional capabilities of the soul. Last week, if you remember, we spoke about Chokhmah and Bina, which are the first two right on the top of our map. Chokhmah is the soul's power to expand its horizons, to reach out for something new, to try to learn something new. And Chokhmah is successful at that. Chokhmah enables us to become better people, to become holier people, simply by the ability, a special gift, to always reach beyond and to, in fact, bring in a nugget of something new and fresh into our minds. Bina is power number 2. It allows us to develop that idea, to help us understand it better. And the message that we left off with last class is a key idea of this chapter. Really, this is the key idea. The key idea is that Chokhmah is a father, Bina is a mother, and when you bring a father and a mother together, you have children. And the children are the emotions. All of the divine soul's emotional experience is created and determined and nurtured, is a product of what it knows, of its Chokhmah and Bina. We spoke a little bit last week. That's why it's so important to study. Study always allows us to reach beyond our current limits. And the more we study it, it doesn't just stay as theoretical information, it changes who we are. And we start feeling differently, which is a very powerful thing. And that's the key idea.
Thank you.
Emotions don't exist in a vacuum. Emotions aren't created in a vacuum. They're a result. That's what we spoke about. Did we speak about the 7 emotions last class? What exactly all the 7 emotions are? I don't know if we went into specifically.
We mentioned them.
We mentioned them. So there's chesed, which is love, which is kindness, gevura. It's a very big study. But here's a key idea. What do you think the divine soul has emotions for? What are the objects? The object of the divine soul's love. The objects of the divine soul's compassion and respect and humility and connection. God. The divine soul has a natural, right? Fancy cars don't talk to the divine soul. It just doesn't talk to us. The same way we humans don't get excited about, hay. Farm animals get excited about hay. For us, we wouldn't have any emotional association to a pile of hay. It doesn't excite us. Okay, but our natural soul, our animal soul, gets very excited about new cars. That's our form of hay. And pizza and ice cream, okay, right? And a good piece of steak.
Not at these prices.
Not at these prices?
Everything's high now. Everything.
Yeah. The divine soul is interested in spirituality, in God, in a relationship with God. The divine soul is very naturally acclimated to be in a relationship with God, which is a very empowering idea. It's all within us. A relationship with God is a very natural thing to us as Jews. And also the divine soul has a very unique way of looking at other people. So all these 7 emotions are used in its relationship with fellow Jews, as well as with itself. We have a relationship with ourselves. How do you feel about yourself? What emotions are you using to deal with today's challenges, to deal with today's issues? For example, let's just give an example. We have Netzach. On the bottom right corner is Netzach. The bottom right corner. Netzach is victory or ambition, right? If you want to, Netzach in one word is dealing with challenges from within. For example, laziness or fear. These are challenges from within that stop us, that are impediments to us. Whenever we overcome a personal challenge, that's Netzach. So the divine soul is constantly using the soul power of Netzach, of victory, of ambition, to overcome its own struggles. That's the way the divine soul relates to itself. It uses the emotions in its own behavior, in its own functionality. And so on and so forth. So we have this idea, the 7 emotions. 7 emotions are created by intellect. Well, the Alter Rebbe is going to walk us through this. So I want to read it with you. The Alter Rebbe is going to give us a very, very quick recap. It's not a recap, a very quick rundown. Just to walk us through the process briefly. How intellect, chachma, bina, we meditate on ideas, the ideas start resonating with us, there's an emotional reaction. Let's start reading on the middle of page 45, where the subtitle is Intellect Gives Birth to Emotions. See that? These mental processes of chachma and bina are the father and mother, which give birth to the emotions of love, reverence, and trepidation of God. The relationship that a soul has with God is the byproduct of what it knows. The Tanya, right, continuing inside, the Tanya elaborates this idea, briefly demonstrating how the divine soul creates emotions through its intellect. I want to do something with you before we read inside. All right? I want you to take 15 seconds or 20 seconds or 30 seconds. Let's do 30 seconds. Even though this is something which really we should be doing for a half hour, maybe an hour a day. We should be doing this properly every single day. I want you to think about God. And what does God mean to you? Just think about it. God of your understanding, all right? Let's do that. Just allow an idea to percolate in your head, all right? Whatever God means to you right now, whatever you're feeling, I want you to meditate on it for 30 seconds. Let's do it. All right. Now I want to ask you how that thought makes you feel. Do you have a feeling that comes from it? What do you say, Debbie?
Peaceful.
Peaceful. Very good. So you feel more at peace. Would you, what was that?
And awe.
In awe? Would you say that's an emotional reaction to information? Feeling at peace and feeling in awe?
It felt.
It feels.
It's an emotional.
Yeah, it's an emotional reaction. Very good. I like that. Anyone else? What do you say?
Felt satisfied.
Satisfied?
Yeah.
Do you mind explaining that? That sounds
I
interesting.
felt like it felt as though things are orderly, that there is a structure, a purpose, and that makes me feel satisfied.
Beautiful. So knowing that life is perfect and beautiful and everything is falling into place just the way it should be, leaves you at peace and satisfied. Anyone else? Any other thoughts? And by the way, if you're on Zoom, feel free to unmute. I want to hear your thoughts. What was the feeling? Even if you don't have a very strong feeling, but what's the...
I had a feeling I was able to look back on all the interactions of the day, which I try and do every day, and everyone I interact with and realizing that it's all God making it happen.
That's beautiful.
And it really completes the day when I look back at it.
That's beautiful. You do that every day?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
I wish I did that every night.
I try. I mean, because I me, I interact with a lot of people.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
What else? Anyone else? Anyone on Zoom have a thought?
It makes me feel joyful, whatever, and I don't really know what God is, but it feels like a very light, joyful energy.
It brings joy to you.
Right, even though life sometimes is not orderly or appears not to be,
Right.
And can be full of pain and emotions and everything, but it's just the joy and the light is there. You just have to reach for it.
That's beautiful. So you see, right over here, it takes, and I want to tell you something. A 3-year-old child could do this as well. My Menla could do it. I want you to think a little bit about Hashem. And what is it, think about something. Think about the idea that Hashem loves you, that Hashem is here watching you, watching over you. How does it make you feel? This is what the author is trying to impress upon us. The divine soul's emotions come through information that it studies and learns and identifies with. So you got to use Chachma. Chachma is when we first get in touch with the nugget of an idea. Bina is when we develop it and start, giving that idea some depth and some meat on the bones that we could start, making it into something. So the author is going to walk us through the process. Now, I just want to give you a little note before we get started over here. The next page and a half of Tanya is the Alter Rebbe running through very briefly the process of meditation that creates emotions. The Alter Rebbe spends chapters and chapters describing this and giving us the tools, the meditative tools in the 40s, chapter 40s. Here, the Alter Rebbe just does it very briefly. Actually, tell you something very interesting. I just saw this recently. As somebody who loves learning Tanya and teaching Tanya, I'm always looking for interesting ideas. So in the 60s, Chabad started, which was then a very novel program. Every Saturday night after Shabbos, there was a Tanya class on the radio in New York City. The whole New York, in Yiddish. It was then in Yiddish. Later on, they also had in English. And Jews then, if you lived in New York, everybody knew Yiddish. Whether you're religious or not, everybody knew Yiddish. So it was a half-hour class, Tanya on the radio. And the Rebbe was such a fan of the project that the Rebbe offered to edit the text, which would be the script for the class. Mm-hmm. So there was a rabbi. His name was Rabbi Yosef Weinberg, and he prepared the. So when he was about to teach this piece of Tanya that we're about to study, he went into tremendous depth to explain all the concepts. And the Rebbe, you should know, was an unbelievable editor. If you look at the Rebbe's edits, he had a very good editing skill. And the Rebbe crossed out most of all of his lengthy explanations and says his lengthy explanations don't belong in chapter 3 of Tanya. Here the author was just telling us the ideas briefly. Everybody's going to learn about it more in depth in 40 chapters from now. So there's always this idea of, we sometimes have to let go. We're going to read something, we're not going to fully get it, but okay. Now is only the brief idea. Let's read. Page 45. The Tanya elaborates this idea, briefly demonstrating how The divine soul creates emotions through intellect. Because when the cognitive powers of your divine rational soul focus deeply on the greatness of God, and specifically, there are three ways. In the world of Kabbalah, there are three general ways how to relate to God. I'll read all three, then I'll explain them to you briefly. Specifically, how A, this is the first way to think about God. God is fully present within creation. To quote the Zohar, he fills all worlds. B, or how God is yet beyond creation. And the quote of the Zohar is, he transcends all worlds. C, or how from the perspective of God's essence, God creation is insignificant. And the quote is, in his presence, everything is considered zero. Very briefly, you could think about God on three levels. All three levels are true. It just depends what role you think about God, what aspect of God you think about. One way to think about God, which many of you mentioned, is think about how God's present within the world. God runs the world. God is actively creating and giving the energy and planning everything in the world. And God is managing everything in my life. That's one way of thinking about God. And like when many of you said, it feels very peaceful. I feel taken care of. That's this way of relating to God. B, there's a deeper way of thinking about God. There's also a way to relate to God, the way God transcends the world, the way God transcends nature. God is even greater than nature. God transcends all of nature. God could change nature at whim, at will. God performs miracles. God creates miracles for us. That's another way to relate to God. Like on Passover, we do that. We speak about how God has a relationship with the Jewish people, which is even beyond nature. That's another way of thinking about God. C, and then there's even a deeper way of learning about God. How, from the perspective of God's infinite essence, all of creation is insignificant. These are very deep ideas. There's three ways to study about God. So the author was just telling us there's three ideas. This was, by the way, was about this in the 1960s radio class. The guy explained these three ideas in great length. And they was like, no. You say it briefly, you move on. That's not the way you teach a class. The author was just trying to... So what happens if you think about God? When you study about God and you think about it, what's going to happen? The Alter Rebbe says, page 46, top of page 46. Then, as a result of this contemplation, an emotional reaction will be born in your mind. Which means before you feel an emotion in your heart, your mind will start getting a sense of an emotion. In general, you should know every emotion, that's the way it works. Every emotion first begins in the head. Did you ever realize that? First, your mind has to kind of appreciate and acknowledge that there should be an emotional response here, and then the heart reacts. So that's step number one, the mind reacts. Then an emotion will be born in your mind. This initial mental emotion is a sense of reverence of God's majesty. In Hebrew, that's yiras haromimus. To revere God and to feel shame in the presence of his blessed greatness, which is without end or limit. The first response that happens when you really start studying about what God is and what God means to me is, even before love of God, is a sense of awe and reverence. And this is where we have something called Yirat Hashem. You ever heard of that term? Fearing God. A lot of people get very scared about that term. Fearing God? What is this? They have to be scared of God? Does that bother you?
It means scared.
It doesn't mean scared. First of all, we have the word shame over here. That's a funny word. To feel, what does that even mean?
Is that the right translation though? Is that supposed to be
Yulia, very good. So I'll tell you.
I just remember you talking about it from another class. I'm not that smart.
Very good, Yulia. That's very smart. If you come to my classes, you become smart. It's not me. It's learning Torah makes you smart. There's no question about that. You're right. The Hebrew word busha translates shame. But if you understand what the word busha means in Hebrew, especially in rabbinic Hebrew, it's a much larger definition than just what the word shame in the Oxford Dictionary is going to mean. So you are right about the Yulia, that the English doesn't fully capture what the word contains in the Hebrew. But in any case, I want to make one thing very, very clear. The Alter Rebbe is talking about having an emotional response, having an emotional relationship. Emotions are relationships. What's your relationship with something? When we speak about being in awe of God, Yirat Hashem, Yirat Shamayim, there's a fear of heaven. There's a fear of God. There's an element of awe in a Jew's relationship with God. It does not mean being scared of hell. You'll never find once in Tanya the idea that a Jew should be in love with reward that he's going to get or scared of punishments. To be quite frank, if somebody's relationship with God is that they're scared of divine retribution, I've got news for you. You are not in a relationship with God. You're in a relationship with yourself. Is that what I'm saying? You don't have respect for God. You just want to live the most comfortable life, and God has the ability to make your life uncomfortable. So therefore, you're going to do what God wants. Is that called being in a relationship with God? Not at all. That's actually being very self-centered. A relationship with God means you have a real awareness, you're bringing God's presence into your life, and that has a reaction. One of them is reverence and awe, knowing that you're in the presence of God. Reverence of God's majesty. There's something so great in your presence. And there's even the sense of feeling shame. What does it mean to feel shame? Feeling shame does not mean like what the English word shame is. And Yulia, I got to look for a better translation. I'm going to make another video. Humbled, but the Hebrew word is busha, which is more than just being humbled.
I think awe, like in awe,
In
is
awe.
a really good translation, because
Right.
if you're being scared, it means that you are almost inspired by it, right?
Right. But it's even more than that. There's an element of shame. I'll put it this way. I once read this. I'm just trying to think of good examples. I once read this. There was a not religious Jew who was going to meet the Rebbe for the first time. He had a relationship with the Chabad Chassid that the Chabad guy was going to introduce him to the Rebbe. And the plan was that they were going to go to one of the Rebbe's Farbrengens, public gatherings. And in between the talks, the Chabad guy is going to introduce this guy to the Rebbe. So the Chabad Chassid told this guy, I just want to give you a little tip. Just have for yourself a little piece of paper with what you want to tell the Rebbe written in advance. Just have it. So the guy says, why would I do that? I don't do that for anybody. I have one or two things I want to tell him. I don't need to write it down. So the Chabad guy said, listen, I'm just telling you, a lot of people, when they come and stand and speak with the Rebbe, they get a little bit overwhelmed. Maybe it'll be a good idea. He's like, nah, come on. He totally didn't buy it. Anyways, he shows up, and it's in the 770 in the headquarters in the large hall. And the Rebbe is there sitting on the stage in the center. And it's in between talks, and he goes over to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe turns around, looks up at him. Boom! He's just so overcome by the Rebbe's presence and the Rebbe's look, and he became frozen. He couldn't speak. I think that's what the shame means. Just think about the fact. There's a certain level of comfort when you're at home in your room. No one's home. You can do whatever you want, right? You don't have to look good for anybody. You don't have to put any makeup. You could pick your nose. I'm saying you can do whatever you want. No one. Right? You get my drift. And then if all of a sudden you realize somebody's looking at you, it changes everything. Even a simple person looking at you. And that's the first idea, just being aware of the greatness of God. Not just you're in God's presence, but the greatness of God. That God and I am in a relationship, and God wants the relationship, and how awesome God is. It's a very scary thing. That's the first reaction. Now, by the way, there are chapters and chapters which discuss the element of fear and awe and reverence in Tanya. So we're going to be doing proper treatment of this. We're just trying to get the basic gist. So that's the first thing. Your mind is going to register an emotional reaction. First, it exists in your mind. Let's continue reading. After the mind, it spills into the heart. Let's read. Following this intellectual experience of reverence in your mind, palpable emotion will follow, which is the trepidation of God in your heart. That's next. Your heart will start feeling it. And after that, the emotion of love follows. You know, in general, in a relationship with God, that's generally the way it works. First, there's the awe, and then there's the love. Love is usually step two. If you think about it, in every single relationship, that's the way it has to work. Relationships that begin with love, not every relationship, but even, maybe you could even argue every relationship. Healthy relationships, love is step two. First has to be an awe and a respect. If you think about it, I have a thought to throw out at you. Either you'll agree or you don't agree. And if you don't agree, it's fine. Maybe the problem with today's relationships is that we speak about too much about the love. The love comes first. So that's not healthy. Respect has to come first. And respect is connected with reverence and awe. Respect means I'm holding myself back. There's a force that is inhibiting me. That's what respect is. I'm stopping myself from doing things because of you. I'm behaving a certain way because of you. That's respect. Within that context, there's love. Can you imagine a relationship of two spouses? The husband tells the wife, I love you, but I have no respect for you. Doesn't mean I have no respect for you. I have no boundaries. I could be with other women. I love you. But it doesn't take away. I love other people too. I love you. Does anybody appreciate that type of love?
Love means,
Non-committed love is not love.
love means many things.
Love also means many things, right? So love is really only a real emotion when it comes within the context of the opposite side, the other side of the coin, which is the fear. Fear in a relationship doesn't mean an unhealthy relationship, right? An abusive relationship. We don't mean that type of fear. We mean a respect for respect for the other person. You know, when I was engaged to Mushki, my mentor told me. I spoke a lot to my mentor while we dated, and also before I got married. He said, "Levi, I just want you to know, the beginning of a failed marriage is when one of the spouses start taking the relationship for granted."
Yeah.
I love that. Take it when the moment you take something. I mean, that means you have no respect for the relationship. Oh yeah, it's automatic. That's not healthy. Okay, in any case. So there's always, in a relationship with God, there's first going to be the emotion of awe and reverence. And within that context, there will be love. Love always follows. It's a natural thing. If you think about it, you'll see that. Love is real love. A healthy love always follows an awe and a respect. And after that, let's read. And after that, the emotion of love follows. Your heart will be ignited with a rapturous love, like flaming fire. That's quoting the Song of Songs. Are you familiar with the Song of Songs? Shir HaShirim? Shir HaShirim is a love song. So the relationship of Jew and God is on the level of a passionate, erotic relationship. That's quite something, no? With passion, desire, longing, and a yearning soul towards God's infinite greatness. When you really study about God, the divine soul reacts. And there's a relationship. The Jew wants to connect with God. It's very natural for a Jew to really want God. This love is described as the languishing of the soul. In Hebrew, that's called kolos nefesh, which we find in Scripture. As the verse states, my soul yearns, indeed it languishes, etc. And my soul thirsts for God, etc. And my soul thirsts for you, etc. 3 verses, all from Psalms, where King David is describing his thirst for God. King David wants a relationship with God. There we have it. That's basically how it works. If you want to have a love of God, you want to have a love of God, you want to have a fear of God, you want to have a love of God, you got to learn about God. When you learn about God, you'll start having emotional reactions. Sounds good? There's the Rebbe's favorite song. I think you could say this. Rebbe's favorite song was on one of these verses in Tehillim. Tzoma lecha nafshi. My soul thirsts for you. and you hear the thirsting in the song. Summer. It's a very yearning song. You hear that's the idea. Okay, let's keep on reading. Okay, this next little section, till the top of page 47, it's an interesting idea. I'm not sure what the Alter Rebbe's point is, but we'll read it. Maybe you'll have some ideas. But here we have it. The Alter Rebbe described us briefly how the soul creates its emotions. Let's continue reading. Emotion is fire, intellect is water. The emotion of yearning and thirsting comes from the element of fire in the divine soul. As the natural scientists write, and Eitz Chaim, a famous book of Kabbalah, states similarly, that the element of fire is in the heart, stimulating emotions. Emotions are passionate. Emotions are fiery. Right? Did you ever try telling somebody who's very emotional to calm down? Works very well, no?
Yeah.
It's like trying to tell a fire to calm down. That's not the way fires work, right? Fires are always just building and building and building and getting more ferocious and more raging. So the emotions of the divine soul come from the heart, and it's fire. Let's continue reading, top of page 47. Whereas the intellect comes from the element of water and moisture. Intellect is the opposite. Intellect is very cold and theoretical and analytical and detached, right? With your mind, you could think through things and think about it. And so it's water and moisture, which is rooted in the brain. The brain is a much calmer tool of the human being and of the soul. As stated in Eitz Chaim, section 50, that Chachma is the element of water of the divine soul. There we have it. We have the Alter Rebbe throws in this idea: emotions are fire, intellect is water. It's a good piece of information. I'm just, in the context of the chapter, I'm not sure why the Alter Rebbe just throws it in. But what we do see over here is that emotions and intellect are two very, very different worlds. The same way fire and water are opposites. That's intellect and emotions really are two very, very different worlds within the human being. But there's a relationship. You know, I'll share with you a little I want to read something to you on this thing. So this is a book of teachings, of talks of the previous Chabad Rebbe. His name was Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, the sixth Chabad Rebbe, right? So the Alter Rebbe was Chabad Rebbe number 1. Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak was Chabad Rebbe number 2. He passed away in 1950. This is his picture, all right? This was the Rebbe's father-in-law.
Right, he was in the Soviet Union.
He was in the Soviet Union, right? So he records here a story that he witnessed with his father. This is what he says. Let me see. We don't know it. So he says that in the winter of 1902, either 1902 or either late 1902 or early 1903, his father, which was the fifth Chabad Rebbe, his father's name was Rabbi Shalom Dovber. He had health problems, so he had to travel to Vienna to meet different doctors and professors. And he went to one professor, and he doesn't say here who the professor was. He says it was a Jewish professor, but the rumor is that it was Sigmund Freud. So the fifth Chabad Rebbe went to Sigmund Freud, and Sigmund Freud said, "I heard about Chassidus. I want to know what Chassidus is all about. What's the teachings of Chassidus all about?" That's what he asked the Rebbe in Vienna. So the previous Rebbe says that my father answered to him. The purpose of Chassidus is, and the teachings of Chassidus is, that the head must give the understanding to the heart what it should desire, and the heart has to bring into its life this that the head understands. It's a very deep statement. Should I say that again? Chassidus, the goal of Chassidus is that the head must give the understanding to the heart what it should desire, and the heart has to bring to life this what the head understands. To teach the head to lead and tell the heart to accept the leadership of the brain. So this professor answered, how does one do that? The head and the heart are two totally different worlds. separated by a great sea. That's what Sigmund Freud understood, right? The human psychology, the human intellect, human heart are two totally separate worlds. How does one combine them? So my father answered him, oh, this is the work of Chassidus, to make a bridge between these two totally sides of the world, or at least to make some type of line of connection, that the light from the head should be able to come to the heart. And this is what Chassidus does. Maybe, I think this falls in the theme of what we're learning about over here. They're two totally separate worlds. Emotions are fire, intellect is water. But this is what it's all about. To make that continuity, to make that line of connection. And that a Jew's life, one second, Joey, should be informed by what it learns, and that the heart should be trained to live that life and to bring those ideas into practice. Yes, Joey?
So it seems to me that the water can cool and calm the fire of the heart.
Oh, very good. Sometimes the heart gets very out of control.
Right, out of control, and the water is the only thing that'll calm that fire.
Absolutely. On the other hand, if you only have water,
Then you don't have any love, you don't have any.
then you have no
fire,
passion.
No passion.
Right.
You need both.
the mind is not passionate.
Right, right.
Which actually brings us to this last part of Tanya here. So there we have it. So far we learned this idea. The Alter Rebbe walked us through the process, how the divine soul uses its intellect to create emotions. We are up to page 47 in the middle. Oh, no, not yet. We have one little section over here. Towards the top of page 47. This concludes our brief overview of how the emotions of love and fear are born through the intellect. But that only talks about two of the emotions. There are 7 emotions, right?
Mhm.
Love is chesed, loving kindness.
Mhm.
Fear and awe and trepidation, that's gevura, which is restraint and fear. But there's 5 others. So the Alter Rebbe says all the 5 others work exactly the same way. So the Alter Rebbe doesn't go into specifics here. The Alter Rebbe says like this: and as for all the other emotions, they are branches and derivatives of reverence, fear, and love, and are developed in the same fashion as is explained elsewhere. So generally speaking, for the sake of understanding Tanya, we don't need to have a deep understanding of each of the 7 emotions. We just understand the basics. There's love and there's fear. And really, if you take a look at page 42, you see page 42? The map, let's go back to the map of the soul, the anatomy of the soul. What you'll see is there's chesed, there's gevura, those are the first 2 emotions. Tiferet, the third one, is really a combination of chesed and gevura. So really we have 3 columns here. So chesed netzach is really just a offshoot of chesed. Hod on the left side is an offshoot of gevura. And Yesod and Malchut are offshoots of Tiferet. So the Alter is saying really we don't need to go in depth. They really all work the same way. And really all the emotions are really captured by love and fear. Okay. So the Alter says we're not going to talk about the rest of the 5 emotions. We're in the middle of page 47. The Alter Rebbe concludes a very quick conclusion for chapter 3, but it's unbelievably important. In a certain way, chapter 3 is over. We've been introduced to intellect. We've been introduced to emotions. We've studied the concept that intellect gives birth to emotions. There's one very important link in the chain. One last important ingredient, which without this last ingredient, everything falls apart. Let's again take a look at the anatomy, at the map. If you realize we spoke only about the first 2 intellectual soul powers, but there are 3 soul powers, 3 intellectual soul powers. Take a look at page 42.
Chapter 42.
The top right is Chachma, right? That's the first step of intellectual pursuit. On the left side is Bina. Bina develops whatever Chachma got a little wind of. But there's a third intellectual power, which is called Dat, or Das. And Das in English is translated as knowledge, which doesn't really help us much, right? Das is the key to creating real emotions. Without Das, everything we've studied about doesn't really function. Let's read a little bit and then we'll discuss. And this is unbelievably important. Part 3, Das, bonding with what we know. The third intellectual power of the divine soul is Das. What does Das mean? The author tells us. The term Das, right? You see how it's spelled in Hebrew? Is found in the verse, Adam knew Yoda Eve. This word implies bonding and joining. Very interesting idea. In the Torah, the first time you'll find the word Das in the Torah is when it speaks about the marital union between Adam and Eve in Genesis. God creates Adam and creates Eve and gives them a commandment, be fruitful and multiply. And that's it, right? That was the first day of their creation, first day of their marriage. So the Torah speaks euphemistically, not explicitly. And the way that the Torah describes the act of marital union is Yoda. Adam knew Eve, which is a very weird euphemistic term, no? Yoda, Adam knew Eve, If I had to ask you, choose 15 different euphemisms for marital intimacy, I don't think you would choose the word knew. Husband, new wife. What does that even mean? So, but here's the idea. We see here that the term Das in Hebrew doesn't just mean knowing, it means a connection, a bond. That's what intimacy is all about. That's what marriage is about, right? It's creating an active bond and investing in that bond. Joining together. Let's pause right over here. Chochmah and Bina. The author told us Chochmah and Bina create emotions. What's wrong? Why do we need a third intellectual power? We're done. Chochmah allows us to learn new things. Bina allows us to develop those new ideas into something which is logical and coherent and we could relate to, and we could process and internalize. What now?
You have to be able to combine the two to use them.
Actually,
The connection. You can have this, you can have that, but you got to connect them.
You got to connect
So if you
them.
work together.
It seems from the Tanya that they're already doing their job. Chochmah and Bina, they're working. I'll tell you. There's a very, very, very big blind spot of smart people. And in general, there's a very big blind spot of knowing. We just spoke about this. Intellect is water. It's calm. It's not passionate. Water is cold, naturally cold. Our brains are naturally cold. On the one hand, that's a gift. It allows us to think about things rationally, right? Think about something objectively. Don't get worked up about it. Think through it. It's a very big tool. That's how the brain works. The brain is naturally objective. And that's also the biggest problem with the brain. Everything it takes in is theoretical, objective, detached. Somebody having information does not equal them changing based on that information. I don't mean to offend anybody, and I'm not. We all suffer from this problem. I'm just trying to give an example which brings out this idea. Have you ever seen a doctor who smokes?
I can't recall.
You can't recall?
Yes.
well, doctors used to smoke all the time in the hospital.
Back in the day.
Oh,
Until today, if you go,
I can't remember.
what was that?
Oh, yeah.
Not for a long time now.
You're saying now it's already more taboo.
Well, they had it.
Much more taboo.
Yeah, but I don't remember ever. I mean,
Never.
I'm sure I do remember.
Have you ever seen a dentist
can't
eating candy?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Or how about a doctor who's very, very obese?
A doctor who's obese?
Oh, I
I
see
see
many
that.
of
And a
them.
doctor who tells people you gotta lose weight. As a kid, I hated going to the dentist. Because why? They tell me what I know
It's
already.
painful, right?
Out there, they tell me what I know already. What you got to floss your teeth? What, you think I don't know that?
Floss.
I know already, right? Like you know the joke. Somebody once asked the dentist, which teeth are the most important to floss? I don't like floss. Just tell me which ones.
Which ones?
It's the dentist said whichever ones you want to keep. Okay, that was a joke. It has nothing to do with Tanya. Okay, here's the idea. People having information does not mean much for your life. Because information And the way our brain works naturally is everything remains theoretical. And the brain is constantly, even if we're moved by the information when we hear it, we lose that movement very quickly. You know how many times people do things, not only in a moment of weakness, but even regularly, and they know that it's so wrong. They can explain to you why it's wrong. They believe it's wrong. And it's not that they're so weak that they have to give in. It's that they don't even realize. They just, the information starts fading into theory, and in practice, it means nothing. Every single human being is guilty of this. I've told this joke before. It's a very good joke, though. There's once a rabbi. This is the way the joke goes. I recently told this to you, so it could be a lot of you just heard this from me. I told this to you in the last class. The story goes, there's a rabbi who's making a building campaign, capital campaign for his synagogue. And on the day of the grand opening, it was a Sunday, they're going to be having a big event. All the donors are coming, the community's coming out. It was going to be a Sunday, and that morning there was Hebrew school, and they were laying down cement, the fresh cement right outside the center.
Oh my goodness.
And the children were just dismissed from Hebrew school, and the parents going to pick them up, and two kids were playing around waiting for their parents. And they ran right over the wet pavement.
There's no barrier. Yeah.
And the rabbi sees it, and the rabbi is already so on edge, he's so nervous and tense, and these sleepless nights and years of stress to get this building up, and that's it, he just loses it.
Whoa.
He starts screaming at the kids. That's the story. Right then one of the parents show up, pull down his window, and he sees the rabbi not just screaming at those kids. And the parent yells out and says, "Rabbi, you're screaming at the children. Don't you always teach us that one is never allowed to scream at children?" So the rabbi, still, passionately enraged, turns around and says, "Yes, I did tell you that. But that was in the abstract. This is in the concrete." We all suffer from that. Information's in the abstract, but then when life in the concrete, all of a sudden it means nothing. Like, there's a story, the Rebbe actually said this story once, I don't know where the story comes from, that Aristotle in general was a very big, he taught his students a lot about living ethical lives. He was very into philosophers being very refined people and elevated people. He was once caught walking down the street with a whole cluster of grapes and just biting off, very, very unrefined. And his students challenged him. He says, this goes against everything you taught us. So he says, right now I'm not Aristotle. Pretty easy way out of it, right? So we could have certain beliefs within us. We can know things, and it means nothing. There are certain people, and I'm just trying to bring out this idea, which is obvious. I suffer from it. We all suffer. This is the human condition. For example, certain people could go on for months not being a good parent to their children. And I don't mean being abusive. I'm not even going there. I'm just saying not giving the proper attention that children deserve when they're being raised. Not giving the children proper attention. They're so busy working. They're so busy this. They just don't give the kids time. They just throw their kid an iPad. But these could be good people. And if you would ask them they care deeply about the children. They're not neglecting the children because it's just a certain lack of connection. Where in the abstract, I love my children. In the abstract, I love my wife and I'll do anything for my wife. But in the concrete, all of a sudden, it doesn't translate. Right? It doesn't come manifest. That is the problem with Chochmah and Bina. Chochmah and Bina theoretically create emotional reactions, but those emotional reactions are very, very weak and very limited, because that's the nature of information. Information slides into the world of theory, into the world of ideas, and into the world of something which really means to me. It doesn't go there. And that is where we have the third intellectual capacity, the third intellectual power, called Das. Das allows us not to learn new things. Chochmah and Bina give us the gift of new information. Das is that we could use our mind. Our mind has the power, the ability to take something we know and to think about it, to concentrate on it, to meditate on it, just to spend time focusing on an idea with consistency until this idea really becomes ingrained in us, starts really meaning something to us and moving us to the point that it really becomes one with us. We become intimate with that idea. We become bonded and joined with that idea to the point it really means something to me. It will move me. I won't become, this is not theory. I'm not detached from it. It's me. And that's the gift of Das, to not be like Aristotle, that the information becomes really part of you. Or like there's another joke, similar joke. There's once a professor of ethics at a university who was caught doing something very unethical. So the students challenged the professor. The student said, if you were a professor of history, okay, I can understand. You did something unethical, you teach history. But you're the professor of ethics, what are you doing? She says, I don't know what you're talking about. Is the professor of math a square? I teach ethics. I'm not ethics. I teach ethics. Das is critical for information becoming real. Without Das, you can learn about something, you'll say, oh, that's such a beautiful idea, I'm inspired. Tomorrow morning, that inspiration is out the window, and that idea is somewhere sitting in your head, and it means nothing to you. You're not a changed person, you're not a better person. You're not somebody who's now elevated their emotional world. That's where Das is.
Rabbi, would it be to use the material in a proper manner? I mean, to use it for the benefit, in a proper way, what you've intellectually got?
Not even that.
Not even.
We're not talking about using it. We're just talking about connecting with it. I'll give you a little example. I'll give you a little example. Where are we holding it? But here is how the teachers of Tanya used to teach. This was the analogy they used to give. I'll tell you this analogy, and then we're going to continue reading because we got to do reading. The story goes. I got to set it up for you. Back in Poland, Jews did not live in central cities. Jews lived all over the countrysides. I'm talking about, in the 1600s, 1700s, that was part of the culture there. In the Polish kingdom or the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. There were, of course, the main Jewish cities, Krakow and Warsaw, but Jews generally lived in the countrysides. And Jews were very illiterate. Jews were not very knowledgeable in those days. And they didn't even know how to read. So the way it worked was usually around more or less in each area, there's usually one Jew who knew how to read, who was a little bit more knowledgeable than the other Jews, and he became like their rabbi. And to be like a little village rabbi didn't take much, but as long as you knew a little bit more than everybody else, you were the rabbi. So one day, one of these, it was called the yeshuvnik. Yeshuvnik means like you're from the country, like you live in a little bit in the middle of nowhere. A simple Jew gets a letter, but he can't read it. So he travels 30 minutes, and he goes to, or 30, or 30 hours, I don't know, to the local rabbi and says, I got this letter, and I don't know what it means. I don't get letters every single day. And the rabbi reads it, the rabbi could read, and the rabbi starts reading that your father died. And the yeshuvnik is so pained by the news, he faints. Let's analyze the story. The story stops right there. Who intellectually understood the letter better? Intellectually. Who had more intellectual powers to study the letter? The rabbi or the yeshuvnik? The rabbi. Of course, the rabbi could read, the rabbi could really... Yet who was more moved by the information? Not the smarter one, the yeshuvnik. That's so weird. Why? You would think the smarter person could be more moved. More smarts, more moved.
But the arbiter had more involved because it was
it meant more to him. For the rabbi, this was somebody died. What do I care? People die all the time. Okay, somebody died. It's sad, but it was personal. But for the farmer, it's personal. This is not just information. It's my father. Without Das, nobody would ever get moved. And Das is such an important ingredient that we have to put effort into in developing our souls, that what we know, we have to think about it and connect with it to the point that it becomes personal. It's my father. I'm talking about my life and my God and my relation with God. It has to move me. That's Das. Let's read. And we'll conclude the chapter right now. Just like physical intimate bonding, das is a process of focusing your mind with a very firm and strong bond, intensely fixing your thought on God's greatness without losing concentration. Give it time, give it consistency. Spend time meditating on ideas that get your godly soul going. Let's continue. Das does not add any new information, which was not already fathomed by Chachma and Bina. Rather, it fosters an attachment to the existing idea to render it real and relevant. How can we apply this idea? That it should be meaningful and personal, not just that I should have information. And the Alter says like this: this is an absolute necessity in the process of creating emotions. Because even if you appreciate God's greatness with your Chachma and Bina, yet, unless you bond your das, focusing your mind with intensity and consistency to these concepts, you will not be able to produce a genuine and long-lasting love and reverence in your soul, but only worthless delusions that will not be sustainable. I love that word, worthless delusions. You could be delusional. You could be delusional that you have a relationship with God. Hey, label. To make it real, you have to have das. Let me ask you a question. If we would spend 10 minutes every single day, 10 minutes, turn your phone off, and think about your relationship with your spouse.
Oh, let me see.
Labishka, you want to come?
You crawling? What are you
I guess the
doing?
class is over. No, we got to finish. We got to finish, then we can
Oh,
party.
let me
Two
see.
more paragraphs.
Two more paragraphs. We're almost done.
Oh, look how
Here's how it
cute.
works.
That is so good.
Oh, no.
Okay. Here's how it works. If we would spend 10 minutes every single day thinking about our relationship with our wife or our husband, I'm just saying wife because I'm a man, but your spouse, would that make us into a better spouse? Spend 10 minutes just meditating, reminding yourself. Would it make you into a better spouse?
Certainly hope so.
If you remind yourself, you connect with the idea. If we think about our children every single day, 10 minutes, focus on them. Would that make us into a better parent? Not just to be a parent reactively, but proactively. Every single day, try to fire yourself up again. If we were to think about our relationship with God for 10 minutes every single day, would that change our relationship with God? We wouldn't be Jewish passively. We wouldn't just be Jewish on autopilot. That's das. Without das, this whole chapter doesn't go anywhere without das. You could be inspired, but tomorrow morning it's out the window. A week later, it's history. Yesterday's rotten lunch. Das is what allows it to be real. Label stealing the show, no? Don't worry, I'm very proud of that.
Smile.
He's full of smiles. Let's conclude.
Hi, honey.
Therefore, das ensures the sustainability of the emotions and is their constant source of energy. For emotions to be real and to last a week and a month and a year and a lifetime, you have to have das, and das continues to make that emotion real. Since all the emotions ultimately depend on das, it incorporates within it chesed and gevurah, meaning the love and its derivatives and reverence and its derivatives. All emotions really begin from das. I'll put it this way. If Chacham is the father and Bina is the mother that develops the child, what's das? What happens after you give birth to a baby? Is the mother's job done? Oh no, right?
Nurturing.
Nurturing. Bina is the 9 months of development of the idea. We're creating the emotion. Das is the continued nourishment of the idea, the nursing mother. And without it, what happens, God forbid, to a baby? You give birth to a baby, you say Mazel Tov. Is it done? Is it a done deal? Okay, we got a baby, we're done. Let's move on.
Called neglect.
That would be called neglect. So we could neglect our emotions. Neglecting emotions means you go to a Torah class, you get inspired, and tomorrow maybe even you made a little thing. I'm going to do a little something because of what I learned. I'm gonna maybe I'll start saying Modani. Everybody. And then all of a sudden the next day and 2 weeks later, it's literally gone. What happened? You're neglecting the process. You did Chochmah, you did Bina, you stopped at Das. Das means you don't just learn about it, but you spend time to reflect again and again outside of the book. Think about it when you're on a walk. Think about it when you're in the shower. Return to these ideas again and again. I remember I have a friend of mine. He's much older than me. He's also a mentor friend. And I once told him that one of the things that get me down is how much I still didn't study and like how difficult it is. Like, he says, "Oh, Levi, you can never think that way. Study is not about amassing knowledge. Really, a Jew could live their whole life with just one idea. Jewish study is not about being smart and intellectual. It's about really connecting with what you study. Stop looking to master stuff. It's about being real. Das helps us be real. You could, a professor could have a lot of information. What does that add up to? Is your life changed? Are they a different person? No. And that concludes chapter 3.
Yes.
Chapter 4, the journey continues. Next week.
Yasher koach.
Yasher koach to all of you. I thank you, David, again. Yasher koach. This is your mitzvah.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you all for joining. If you have any questions, please never hesitate. Stay on board. Send me emails. This is what it's all about.